Okay, so everybody, welcome back to our session number 4, and we have called it Sustainable Cities, Low Carbon Urban Mobility and Logistics Systems. We have been carrying out some very interesting topics when it came to urban logistics and freight systems during our second lecture, and we had external guest speakers from WHU Otto Beisheim School of Management, Stefan Spindler, then for instance, and then we went through the very interesting future foresights with Frauke Heistermann, who has told us how attractive the logistics sector should be, especially for the young careers, and what are the future foresights into this sector. That was really very inspiring. I hope not only for me, but for you as well. Then we had basically the next session, which was dealing with business innovation and business models. I have started the talk about what are in general the business models, and then we went through into some theories on business model innovations, and especially when it comes to sustainability. What are the sustainable business models, their cases? And then during the last session, beyond this theoretical background and concepts, I have given you some hands-on tools like business model canvas, and I hope very much that you will be using this tool for developing your own ideas to present us on 10th of December. Then we had also some external speakers during the last session, and we had basically dealt with startup incubator business Metropolitan. Frank SPaCiH has talked about the initiatives we are doing here in our region, how we can transform the region based on new kind of entrepreneurial spirit and new startups, why we should become so attractive as a region, and what can we learn from the other regions like Tel Aviv or Toronto, Berlin. What are the key attractive factors for our region as well? Then we had two very interesting startups. The first one was dealing with Luke Basecamp, who has integrated or developed very, to my mind, very interesting business model, and as a scanner to scan the damages of the transporters. And we have seen that actually only through this psychological effect that the driver knows at the end of the day he has to drive through this scanner, it reduces the entire damage of the logistics sector or costs of damages by 40%, which is a huge reduction of the cost. And this business model is actually being fulfilled by Amazon in the Essen Center, and it works really well. Then we had another startup who is dealing with park management system, and they have introduced a very interesting tool to see kind of a real-time free parking space. The basic idea is to reduce the traffic which is searching for parking systems. That was last time, and now we are going for our next session, which is going to be very interesting, like the others as well. But today somehow I'm even more delighted to have you as guest speakers here with us. So what is our program for today? We will have first of all, I would say a festival like as a host, but today you are as a guest. That's 2 rules. So you can also put your mask on you as a mask singer. So we will start with festival, then we will go to Ralf Kuron, who will be telling us about a very exciting project on smart park city hubs, SPaCiH, which we are also kind of doing together. And now I'm listening to my echo once again. Then we will have Professor Haidar Majid from Bochum University, who is an expert on smart cities. Dorothea Bateva will be joining us at some point, at a later point. She is from the Deutsche Bahn digital partner, DB Systel, and she will present us the Curbside Management service, which is being developed by her and is being already applied in many different cities. Last but not least, our very good colleague Tim Grootman will join us. He's professor of logistics at the Westküste University of Applied Sciences. And he will be talking about customer-oriented logistics services. So that's going to be a very exciting day. At the end of the guest speakers, we will go again through the group works, and surely all of you are invited to stay until the end. But if you can't do so, we won't be very angry with you. Probably a little bit disappointed, but not too much. We will go through the working groups and see what is the progress of different working groups. We have defined 6 leading questions, and so kind of I have given a structure for all of the working groups, so that at the end of the day, when they come up with their presentations and new ideas about urban logistics and supply systems, we might have a good criteria catalog, so that it will be simply easier for us to judge all of them on a fair basis. At the end of the day, the best ideas will not be kind of gone, but we will take them, and probably it could be a good start for a long-lasting collaboration in a form of projects, proposals, or probably publications. So yeah, I said I won't take too much time. For our external guests, Raif Kuron and Haida Mecic, we have so many participants from all over the world. Essentially, we had 100, but there was a natural filter mechanism. We didn't want to filter them out, but as said, because of the natural mechanism, some of them could not join us. And the basic 45 people are with us, and we are very much interested also to get your perspective on different kinds of this kind of scientific, academic, but also industrial and political inputs you are getting. So once again, for all the participants, during the presentations, you just feel free to write in the chat. I will take all the questions, and we will have very active discussion as it has been until now. So we will start with our first guest, but as I said, host lecture as well. Festival Godwin Betting is going to give us a lecture about or towards low carbon urban mobility in Africa, addressing Ghana's heavy dependence on used vehicles. With festival research experiences have mainly revolved around topics other than transport, including building-related catastrophes like housing inequalities, marginalization of women, and land administration. He has, however, recently begun applying the ideas and lessons he has learned from engaging those topics to support equitable and sustainable urban mobility, as well as access research and policy in sub-Saharan Africa. His current postdoctoral research at the Center for Sustainable Urban Development of the Earth Institute of Columbia University, New York, is focused on cleaner, safer, and affordable transport in Africa. So, Festival, you have the word. We are very much interested to listen to your talk.
All right, thank you, Annie. Okay, great. We're going to talk about used vehicles and their impact on carbon emissions in the context of Africa. We're talking about vehicles that someone else has used, and then they sell it to other people to also use it. Okay. A lot of such vehicles are exported or imported to Africa and other parts of low and middle income parts of the world, from advanced capitalist countries, US, Europe, Japan, and all that. And these vehicles are very, very important because they support mobility in those parts of the world. But then they also create problems because they are often fuel inefficient, and therefore contribute to carbon emission, high carbon emission, and air pollution. And they tend to also create other public health problems. Our focus is on low carbon emission, but there are also other issues. For instance, because they are prone to malfunctioning, they tend to involve themselves in road traffic crashes, which leads to a lot of problems. So what many countries in Africa do is that they try to impose bans and penalties on the importation of such vehicles. And the idea here is that if you reduce the number of such vehicles coming into your country, then you are reducing the pollution, environmental problems, and the other public health problems that come with them. The challenge is that even though such interventions, the bans and the penalties that are placed on their importation, tend to reduce the number of used vehicle imports, they really lead to sustained public health benefits in terms of reducing road traffic crashes, air pollution, and also shifting public towards the use of less polluting, eco-friendly options. What we will do today is try to consider the case of Ghana, which is where I come from, and also one of the biggest destinations of used vehicles in West Africa, and try to think about what better interventions we can develop to deal with used vehicle dependency in Africa, aside from just imposing bans and penalties on their importation, which obviously as we would show doesn't work. We could use all the comments you have to develop. It's a paper I'm working with Dr. Jackie Klopp. She should have been part of the teaching team, but she couldn't be here. For which reason Annie has had to do the whole job. Sorry, Annie. And so we could use all the comments you have to further develop the paper. All right. Now let's look at some numbers. All right. Some 14 million used cars and vans and minibuses were exported from Europe, US, Japan between 2015 and 2018 to low and middle income countries. The majority of them went to low and middle income countries, 80%. And more than half of the 80% ended up in Africa, according to the records of the United Nations Environment Programme. And as we said earlier on, these vehicles are very, very important because they support mobility. They are used as public transport, and also they are used, as personal, vehicles. So they are very, very important to the economy of the receiving countries. But then they also create, some problems. We talked about, climate issues, because they are often, fuel inefficient. They contribute to high carbon emission, and also in turn contribute to air pollution, which kills some 600,000 people per year, according to the United Nations Environmental Programme. And as we said, the problem is not just about pollution; it's also about road traffic crashes, because they malfunction easily. They tend to involve themselves a lot in crashes. Currently, road fatality rate in Africa stands at some 26.6 deaths per 100,000 people. That is nearly 3 times the rate of Europe. And Africa is actually low in terms of motorization rates. So used vehicles are important, but then they also create problems, environmental and other public health problems. So for these reasons, what governments in Africa often tend to do is that they try to impose bans on their importation. And as you can see, this is just a couple of news reports on various countries in Africa placing bans, on their importations. So if you want to bring them into the country, so the idea, for instance, in Ghana, they say you cannot bring a car that is older than 10 years, any car that is older than 10 years, into the country. And if it's 10 years or less, and you want to bring it, you pay, a lot of taxes on it. The idea here is to, disincentivize, people from exporting or importing such vehicles into the country, with the effect that it would also bring down the pollution problems, the crash problems, and also probably shift public demand towards new, less polluting, eco-friendly ones. But the problem is these interventions often work. Okay, officially, and I'm putting officially in quotation marks because we would come back to that point. The official records show that when such bans are placed on their importation, they reduce the number of used car imports. For instance, in Ghana, back in 1998 and 2002, they placed bans on the importation of such cars. The evidence suggests that the policy led to a very sharp reduction in overall vehicle importation. And since 90% of all vehicle imports to Ghana are used vehicles, you can argue that it's led to a reduction in the importation of used vehicles, from 15.35% in 1998 to 5% in 2003. The reduction is very, very significant. And when the interventions were lifted, there was a sharp rise in the rate of vehicle importation, registration, and as we said, the majority of them are used vehicles. So we can safely argue that it's the lifting of the intervention led to the importation of more and more used vehicles into the country. But then, when you have reduction in the number of used vehicle imports, does that also lead to increased public health gains in terms of reducing pollution, in terms of reducing traffic crashes, in terms of shifting public consumption towards less polluting, eco-friendly ones? Well, not really. Suleimana, one study in 2012 tried to examine how the ban on used vehicles in 1998 and 2002 in Ghana impacted on air pollution, and they did not see any evidence that it led to reduction in air pollution in the country. And if you also look at the table here, from 1998, up to 2006, that is within the period that the bans were in place, road traffic, crash injuries did not, reduce, significantly. And there is a recent analysis by, Ayeto and his friends. They've shown that, if you impose bans and penalties on used vehicles import in Africa, not just in Ghana, it does not lead to a commensurate increase in new vehicle purchase in the continent. So you have this contradiction. Placing bans and penalties on used vehicle imports reduce the number of used vehicle imports, at least per official figures, but then it does not translate into environmental and also public health benefits. So the question is why? If you want to understand this contradiction, you would need to interrogate the whole idea of vehicle dependency, right, in those parts of the world. And we try to conceptualize, that of Ghana, right? If you go to Ghana, and it applies to, other parts of, Africa too. The point is that the governments or city authorities and central governments tend to prioritize automobile infrastructure. A lot of public resources, money, are spent on constructing roads, and also the land use patterns like planning laws and regulations are also used to support automobile use. A lot of suburbanization going on. And so by prioritizing, automobile infrastructure and also applying your land use patterns and also planning regulations to support automobile use, there is inadequate focus on other modes of transport. for instance, the railway transport or non-motorized, forms of transport, bicycling, walking, and other forms of, in transport in the country. Now, and the public transport sector also does not work. So the combined, implications of, all this is that you encourage automobile consumption culture. And so many people are incentivized or forced to use vehicle, which means that then you've entrenched motorized, transport dependency. 95% of all mobility or trips in Ghana are by, road, and you have to use, cars because you don't have, other means of transport in the country. And so it's in the context of this entrenched motorized, transport dependency, and also weak regulation of, vehicle emission. The standards are low; they are less enforced. People also don't have, a lot of money, low levels of income to buy new cars because they are more expensive compared to the, used vehicles. And you also don't produce a lot of vehicles locally. And it's also easy to fix, used vehicles. And so if you bring all these together, what happens is that you stimulate demand and supply of, used vehicles. So a lot of people would, demand that, and so it will lead to more. It leads to more, importation. If you take, if you frame the problem this way, it becomes easier to understand why, when bans and penalties are imposed on the importation of used vehicles, they do not lead to increased, public health benefits and, climate gains. The reason is simple. When you impose the bans and penalties on, used vehicle imports, what you do is that you just raise the regulatory standards higher. The bar for regulation is, raised higher. But that does not, do anything to consumption. People still have to depend on, vehicles because you've entrenched motorized transport dependency. So now you've placed bans and make, the importation of used vehicles, very difficult. But you also don't provide, alternative means of transport. As we said, the public transport sector does not, really work. So what it does is that it's just, direct the consumption to, the black market. There is a lot of evidence for, corruption and also this idea of more vehicles being exported, on the blind side, of the government. The European Union argues that, some 4 million used vehicles, they call them unknown whereabouts vehicles, find their way into the global fleet of, vehicles. And of course, if you look at the dynamics of global vehicle exports, you are very sure that a lot of them are going to places, like Africa and Ghana. And so by sending the consumption to the black market, your data will tell you, official data will tell you that, okay, you are reducing used vehicle imports, but then you are not. You only do not, see what's happening. There is a lot of evidence, with custom officials, corrupt, custom officials in cahoots with, importers, manipulating vehicle details so they could escape, the imposed bans and penalties. And so that is why if the bans and the penalties don't actually lead to public health gains and all that. So the question is, what else could you do aside from just imposing bans and penalties to improve the situation or address this problem with used vehicle dependency? I think if you deal with the issues on our left-hand side, if you stop prioritizing automobile infrastructure, for instance, instead of using public resources to create more roads, you invest in public transport. A lot of people will shift from personal cars to private cars. If you change the land use patterns, which supports vehicle use, and also do a lot of non-motorized transport, bicycling, walking, and other modes of transport, you would reduce automobile consumption culture, which would in turn also bring down the problem with used vehicle dependency. I think the other day someone made a very interesting point when we were talking about shifting towards sustainable forms of mobility that in Africa, and I think he was specific that it's the case in Uganda, and the use of vehicles is some sort of status symbol. That's true. I mean, it's not just a Ugandan phenomena. It's applies to a lot of countries in Africa, including Ghana. But that should be expected. If you vote public resources, planning laws, streets, finance, and everything to support the consumption of something, surely, people would also recognize such things highly. And so you could use public policy to also turn public perception about such things. For instance, I stayed in Denmark for a while for my master's for 2 years. This is a very rich country with very rich people, but everyone has a bicycle. And big business people, rich people, they all bike, in the country. And it's not a natural creation. There was a conscious policy to incentivize people to bike. Investments were made to make biking safer, enjoyable, congenial. And so people just shift to biking. So if you consider such policies, you are likely to also shift public attention or consumption of automobile to other modes of transport that are very sustainable. So I guess the point that I'm making overall is that the problem with youth vehicle dependency in Africa needs to be tackled in the context of the broader problem of motorized transport dependency. If you reduce motorized transport dependency, you are reducing used vehicle dependency, since most of the vehicles that you use in the continent are used cars. So when you reduce the heavy reliance on vehicles, automatically reliance on used vehicles would also come down. And as I said, a lot of intervention could be made to achieve this, investing in public transport, motorized modes of transport, changing the land use patterns. And so aside from just imposing the bans, if you consider these approaches, they could well help bring the problem down. So that is the kind of arguments we are trying to use our paper to make. And if you have questions, we are happy to take them. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Percival, I have indeed a question. What could you learn from New York case, and how you are implementing this general knowledge from Columbia University for the specific case?
Yeah, hello, Annie.
Yeah, hi, Percival. Could you understand my question?
I heard you said something about New York.
Okay. Okay. So I will repeat my question. My question was going in the direction, what general knowledge from New York and what specific knowledge from Columbia University you could implement in this study? Is a connection or?
Oh, okay. Okay, yeah. I think well, New Yorkers complain that the public transport is not great, but someone coming from Ghana, I think that they have options. I mean, you have buses running, you have metros, the subway, also running, and so I think this idea of investing in public transport is something that I think if it's replicated, in Africa and in other parts of the world that depend on used vehicles, it could help reduce this idea of used vehicle dependency. And there is also some efforts towards promoting other non-motorized forms of transports also in New York. I've seen people trying to bring this idea of bicycling, which I mentioned the case of Denmark. So I think general investment in public transport and also non-motorized means of transport. These are some of the ideas that I think could be properly adapted and applied in the context of Ghana and other parts of Africa to bring down the problem with used vehicles.
The question from Stefan Arthur is going in the same direction. He's asking about the key or basic problem of the public transportation in Africa, but probably worldwide in other developing countries. What could be the key problem?
Well, my research, focus on driver behavior, a lot. There are lots of exploitation problems. I mean, okay, for instance, if you look at the Ghanaian context, for instance, so the public transport is run privately, right? People have their own cars, and they lease the cars to drivers to drive. Then the drivers will pay the car owners, some rent. But then the arrangements between them, the rents they pay to the car owners, they tend to be very exorbitant, which incentivize inappropriate driving practices with implications for crashes. Little investment is also spent on improving the vehicles. They are already used vehicles, worn out already, and then as they put them on the roads, they do not maintain them properly, and so there is not much interest in public transport in those parts of the world. And because it's for profit, a lot of people import the cars, put them on the roads. Then you saturate the roads, which is also causing traffic congestions and all that. So the public transport sector doesn't really exist properly speaking. And if you bring all these problems together, and the safety issues, efficiency issues, relying on them is problematic. If I want to move out from my house right now, I just go to the roadside, check the timetable. I am sure that if they say within 5 minutes a car is coming, 5 minutes, you would get a car. This level of scheduling and predictability is really not present in the context of Africa, which brings together the idea that people couldn't rely on them, so everyone would want to get their own private vehicle. So it's a whole lot of problem, efficiency, safety, quality of vehicles, reliability, coming together, and that really undermines the public transport sector in Africa.
Okay, thank you. Now, there is a hand from Moti. If we could make it short, please. Yeah, both question and answer, because we need to move further. Moti.
Okay, thank you very much. Maybe my question, all African countries may be the same to this presentation relatively. Maybe my question is to minimize carbon urban mobility, African countries may be low impacts. Especially, maybe my question is for festivals to sustain natural resources in African countries, or to free natural resources to sustain natural resources in Africa, to make African countries the problem of carbon mobility, carbon urban mobility. What kinds of opportunity maybe we have?
What kind of opportunities does Africa have in relation to
other developed countries? This clear?
I think the question is in the following way: what kind of opportunities are there to sustain the urban mobility or to transform it? More
of course, there are a lot of opportunities to sustain urban mobility. We were talking about investment in public transport. I mean, a lot of people don't use the public transport because you can't. We talk about reliability, we talked about safety issues, we talked about the quality of vehicles, and all that. And so if proper investments were made in the public transport sector, it may go a long way to shift the heavy reliance on personal vehicles, and most of them are also used vehicles, and to support low carbon mobility in the continent. And there are opportunities to also change the planning regulations in ways that would support other modes of transport. If people could access the things that matter to their life within some 15-minute distance from their houses, it doesn't matter you are bicycling or you sit in a car. I think that would also reduce carbon emissions and reliance on vehicles generally. So there are a lot of opportunities in Africa to reduce carbon emissions. Yeah.
Okay, thank you so much. First of all, we will cut down the discussion at this moment. There are some more questions, but all of you are here with us until the 10th of December. So you will be given the chance to discuss further. Now, first of all, if you could stop sharing your screen, it would be very nice, because then I would go further, sharing mine. Great, thank you. Okay, so now it's my pleasure to go further and introduce you to Ralf Kuhn, who is going to give us a very interesting presentation, probably from SPaCiH. We will listen to it. Ralf is researcher and lecturer at the Institute of GAMIT at the Hochschule Niederrhein University of Applied Sciences since 2017. GAMIT, the Institute of Business Process Management and IT, he is working in 2 projects. Kuron is project manager for future logistics project at Smart Park City Hubs called SPaCiH, in which we are also from the University of Duisburg-Essen, and especially Center for Logistics and Traffic are included. As well as Ralf is a project manager and business architect for a port digitization project, logistics NFA. Furthermore, he's lecturer for HR, IT, and e-businesses. From 2016 to 2017, Ralf had lectures at the Rhine-Waal University of Applied Sciences for computer networks and internet. Before that, he worked for various companies and was also self-employed. For instance, he worked at Hewlett-Packard at Cloud Business, Channel Development and Marketing Manager for 11 years, and for 6 years as Head of Portfolio and Product Management and Marketing at Triathlon GmbH. Ralf Kuron has a diploma in computer science at RWTH Aachen University. Ralf, it's my pleasure to have you here, and we are very much excited to listen to your talk today.
Yeah, thank you.
The word is yours.
Yes, great. So I try to share my screen, and I guess it works.
Yes, it's coming. Perfect.
Yeah, wonderful. Okay, so yeah, welcome everybody all over in the world. I'm just sitting in the middle of Germany. Yeah, it's raining and cold outside, and I see that some of you have other weather conditions. Yeah, so wonderful for you. Yeah. What we are doing here, it is the SPaCiH project. I'm gonna introduce to you. Annie, how much time do I have? 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 20 minutes, 30 minutes?
As much as you wish. No, 20 minutes.
20 minutes, okay.
More or less. Actually, we say 15 with 5 minutes discussion, but yeah, just take your time. I don't want to cut you, but okay. 15 to 20 minutes.
Okay, great. Okay, so this project is a project of 4 partners, as Annie already mentioned. It's her university and the University of Bochum and the company called Systel. What stands SPaCiH for? It's Smart Park City Hubs, this acronym, and the project goal of all is sustainability and logistics. And there's some money from Europe, and here our country coming financing this project. Okay, what's the problem we're addressing? As everybody knows, in traffic, there's much too much CO2 emissions. We have here congested cities with a flood of parcels, a lot of them coming from China, delivered by, and that's reality, non-cooperating deliverers, parcel deliverers here in Germany, and parallel. So much delivery costs here you can see in the cities. And there's a nice, interesting effect. We have inland ports, city ports, which are not used for urban supply, just for industrial supply, but not for urban supply, although they are near the cities. And we have empty trucks on the streets. It's about 40% of all truck trips, which only transport air, nothing else. So this could be a thing to improve. And we have much too many trucks on the roads. Alone in our little small country here, North Rhine-Westphalia, part of Germany, let's say 20% of Germany. If you calculate, there are trips below 300 kilometers, makes per year 2,000 million kilometers, and trips above those 300 kilometers, 4,000 million kilometers per year. So we have trains and ships, of course, but let's say around 80% of all those traffic transports are done with trucks, not with more eco-friendly systems like trains and ships. So a lot of improvement potential, as you can see, and we address this with our project. Our project looks like this. So we're gonna initially, we are looking about the initial situation. So that's what this problem statement is about, and a lot of numbers describing traffic. Then we do the development and the concepts and models, which are at the heart of the project. And we are discussing the application of the concepts with participating ports, where we try to match this concept and the theory we are developing with the reality, with the real reality, not to have such advanced concepts which has no relevance for practical applications. The output is a master plan and action guideline for the government, how to make it better in the future. And the connection point to the reality is done with innovation labs, where we invite people, companies, cities, harbors, and so on, and discuss our concepts with them. Okay. So that's the playground with we are in with our project, and it's end to end. So there's, you see the seaports here, and beyond the seaports, something like China and other exporters. And on the other hand, on the other side of this picture, we have the consumer sitting here in nice houses, which needs to be provided, supplied with goods. And everything in between, we are addressing in our project. So the connection, the traffic connection from seaports to our country here, to North Rhine-Westphalia, the modes of transport, be it trains, or ships, or trucks. We look at the cities and micro hubs and city logistics, and how to get goods from the hubs down to the consumer. And we see in the middle here this network of nodes, of hubs, of SPaCiH hubs, which do this distribution and this management of the flows of goods. The overall rule is transports should be used or ships and trains should be used as far as possible down the line here to the consumer, and only for the last miles, trucks or other means of transport should be used. Yeah, so eco-friendly backbone, logistical backbone. Yeah, and only for the near distances, the usage of trucks and other means of transportation to get it down into the cities. Okay, and that's a real world view. Yeah, there's a city, there's a port near the city. We have trains here, we have here bicycles, yeah, and we have trucks. Just to show you that there's a real interpretation of all the things we are discussing. Okay, project goals. We are dealing with urban supply, with circular urban supply. Our goal is sustainable city logistics. Resilience is a topic. We have the smart park approach, where the cooperations platform of players in logistics and industry are brought together for synergies. We are addressing not only logistics, but only value creation, so industry parts. In logistics, especially bundling, yeah, to bring freights together to fill up trucks and other means of transport full, and to have not those air transports. We're using sustainable energies and energy autonomy and those smart park city hubs. And all those hubs are connected in a country network, where again the cooperations platform is a means of cooperation and synergy, and this connection to the seaports and multimodal transports. So there's a map of Northern Australia, where you see those triangles which represent those smart park city hubs or spaces. This could be the case, so we are just thinking where to position them to have optimum in a network which works well. The tasks of the project, they are addressing first the abstract modeling, what is a SPaCiH, the network, and in a practical way, where to position them and how to size those hubs. Okay, well, that's the SPaCiH network, and another representation. We have, I'm gonna, due to the time, I'll skip over it and go to the SPaCiH model, the abstract SPaCiH model. What is a SPaCiH node? What is this hub about? So it's, of course, infrastructure. So warehouses, streets, railway, port, cables, fiber, and so on. Everything with a physical infrastructure. Yeah? Then there are services on this infrastructure running, like cleansing security service, utilities, internet, traffic management, and so on, to make this infrastructure work well. On top, for such a hub, there's a SPaCiH management, which takes care of those infrastructure services, organizes them, and the infrastructure. And those three components, those are the platform, or let's say the platform for the companies residing inside those hubs. The companies are production companies, are logistical companies, and other cross-service companies like maintenance, condition monitoring, IT, catering service, and so on. Yeah, so the task of the SPaCiH management is to provide the infrastructure and for the companies and enable them to work together. And how to enable this is the cooperations platform as an IT tool to bring them together and to enable cooperation or collaboration. That's the central part of everything here. Okay, if you look from a logistical standpoint, such a SPaCiH has different kind of interfaces. It has, by definition, because SPaCiH stands for Smart Park City Hubs, a logistical city interface, of course, yeah, down to the consumers. Then there's a SPaCiH network, as I explained. So there are from one SPaCiH hub connections to other spaces in the network. And we have, of course, other logistical systems, yeah, be it airplanes, be it other railway services or ship carriers or trucks and so on. Yeah, so we need an interface to the rest of the logistical world. By this, we can think of 4 types of SPaCiH types, yeah, which differ by the interfaces provided, just to give you an impression of the logical nature we are dealing with here and the systematical approach. Okay, now let's skip over this. So, if we look from the SPaCiH network, so the collection of nodes as a whole, this is here on the top level, it's a SPaCiH head organization responsible for the whole network. Yeah? There is a strategy, of course, and a derived business model. Yeah? For a single node inside this network, there's of course a local strategy for this node, could be concentrating on the different domains of business, yeah, for example, food supply, yeah, and of course there's again an associated business model for each node. Yeah. The central task of such a business model and the strategy of a node is to define an ecosystem of companies working together in an optimal way. Yeah? That's the task of the node to construct such an ecosystem where synergies are most probable. Okay, so here we skip over. So, and the cooperation platform is a central tool of cooperation. So we have value generation, generating companies, logistical companies, such a kind of cross-functional companies, all connected through the cooperations platform, which is in effect a kind of marketplace for supply and demand. Yeah. And the goals are bundling and sharing, synergy and transport optimization, efficiency, and not the last one, the sustainability of the whole system. This cooperations platform, if you specify it near down the way to an IT implementation, there is of course an interface to users, to customers. Yeah, there's a web portal and of course an API interface. And the domains of this cooperation platform deals with data and data spaces, which is the basics for a cooperation, shared data pool, supply chains management, community functions for this ecosystem, business functions, and in the end to make transactions possible. We have an e-commerce pillar here, which provides services, e-commerce services to the consumer to make it, to enable them to order something out of this ecosystem, and of course administration services. Okay, we skip this SPaCiH project tasks. This was the first part, abstract modeling of the SPaCiH on the network. Yeah, I gave you a little look inside the project. We are half the way down. It is end of 22 when the project will be finalized. So we have just 1 year left, which is still a lot. Yeah, there's a lot of work in front of us, but I guess this time will be sufficient for this modeling tasks and concept tasks. So this is the first one, this abstract modeling. Yeah, second part of the task is the concrete plan, where to position exactly those spaces and how to size those spaces. Yeah. This is a logistical infrastructure in the country. And what is needed to do this? Of course, data. So we're going to analyze the real flows of goods in Germany, to understand the complete picture. And we analyze the urban supply demand, to understand the pull side of urban demand, the what and how much is needed by a typical household. So let's have a look at it. Our SPaCiH data strategy. So as I explained, the consumer supply and the total supply. The consumer is not everything, but a lot. But there's, of course, industry supply also in this whole picture, and this is the total supply. So we analyze urban supply demand. There we use the consumer shopping basket as a statistical means. Where we calculate how much will be consumed by an average household or consumer, as the amount of goods and type of goods which needs to be transported to a household in numbers of kilograms and space in liters or cubic meters. That's can be derived from official statistics and adding a lot of own calculations. Then we have this complete supply stream down to the cities, which need to be covered somehow, And this numbers are the base for so-called scenario for 100% consumer supply through the SPaCiH network, where we can say, okay, we need so many spaces at that point, ideally in the neighborhood of the cities, the capacity of those spaces, the capacity of the backbone in the country, and the capacity of the transport means to enable all this. On the other side, this is only the consumer supply side, this is the total supply side. And there we have a nice data source, which is called the Verflechtungsmatrix in German. The matrix which shows the total flow of goods in Germany, which is a very nice tool to understand what is transported how in Germany. And again, the same procedure as before. We have, based on this data, we can calculate the number of hubs needed, and so on, and the position to cover this advanced scenario. So this matrix I'm talking about, so we have here our nice country, Germany, and a lot of cells, you can see which are marked here in this map, all those cells, which are a lot, hundreds of cells, traffic cells, we have a data set which describes, here's the data structure of this data set with more than 3 million records, which describes exactly from each cell here to each other cell in Germany, the carrier type, be it a train or truck or a ship, the goods type, which types of goods are transported, the traffic type, and the tons and kilometers which occur there. So you can imagine it's a huge map. It's a lot of numbers. Which gives you a complete picture of all the transports in Germany. Well, nice data set you can analyze. Okay. This is on the NST 2007, where in a worldwide standard, types of goods are, and this is just a snapshot here for some divisions of those classification. You see here basic metals, fabricated machinery, other non-metallic, and so on. So all the types of goods you can imagine in a worldwide context are described here and structured here, and that's what's used in this matrix. What we want to understand is this picture here. So here we have our participating cities and harbors. It's Krefeld and Wesel. So two ports or cities. we want to understand the complete traffic happening here inside the city, between the city and its region, between the city and its port, between the region and its port, between the seaports and here the cities and the region, seaports to the country, and so on. And you will see here this Chinese flag. We have here a terminal point of the Silk Road in Duisburg, and also besides those seaports, there's containers coming to Germany. Understanding this complete picture, this enables us to do our modeling and our concepts. And this is an example what comes out for one city, Krefeld, in this picture here per anno. So we can say top 3 goods are coming into Krefeld here as chemicals, earth and stones, with the amount in tons, and waste and secondary materials, which means of transport are used, which tons are on this means of transport, and there's happening something in Krefeld and at this location. There's usage, of course, there's processing, further processing. There's also primary production at this point out of the Krefeld. Goods and materials are exported, and transshipment is also happening here. So, and we know exactly what's coming out here, which carriers, and which types of goods. In this case here, it's identical, the top 3 types of goods, but the amounts are somewhat different. This we're going to do for different locations to understand what's happening there based on the metrics I introduced to you. Okay,
right. Oh, perfect.
That's 20 minutes.
Yes, thank you so much, Ralph, for very interesting. One of our baby projects. We like it a lot. So, do you have any questions to your participants? Other than that, I could ask you whether you have in your countries this kind of comparable concepts. Are you aware? Great presentation.
Yeah, a lot of stuff I presented. I see in the chat there's a question.
Oh yeah, that's coming. What's the core difference between SPaCiH concept from an intermodal logistics center platform?
But the core difference between the concept coming from an intermodal logistics, and that's basically only different because of the build, because the cooperation plan among, yes, it's cooperation, of course. It is the sustainability approach and the synergy, which are at the heart of the whole project. And it is this integration of logistics and production and regional production. So it's not only about transporting goods from China efficiently to the households. It's also all about regional production, and to get it integrated in this picture, and to enable this local circular flows. Although, as you know, the best logistics is if you don't need it, because everything is at your front door, available directly. You go by foot 10 meters and everything available. This would be the best case, but not everywhere realizable. And to bring it all together, so the pieces are well known. This cooperation platform is only available in subdomains, to coordinate track traffic and so on, and loads and so on. Yes, this is available, but this is completely separated from ship transports and train transports. The access to such logistical systems is really not easy, at least in Germany. So there's not one order interface where you can really without any problem order what you want. It's a lot of information, knowledge, and connections necessary, and in the end, truck is the most flexible and easiest system. Yeah, that's the reason why it's so heavily used. Yeah, but from an ecological standpoint, not necessarily the best. Yeah. So it is to bring all the pieces together, yeah, to have a big, really a big picture, a big mosaic, yeah, of little solutions, and bring it in one big picture together. That's the goal of the project.
Mm-hmm. And that's a complicated goal, also for realization. What also our participants have commented in one of the previous comments. Really excellent, but need a good framework. Yes, indeed. Another comment is coming here. Well, indeed, the framework, one of the projects is project aims is to develop this framework, right? Right.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, exactly. The framework and the what is it? This will to cooperate. Yeah.
Yeah.
But if there's enough pressure on the system, so meaning CO2 reduction, yeah. You can have regulative measures, yeah. So everything is needed, yeah, to make it work. Then, yeah. But in the end, we have no choice, yeah. So this age of pollution and waste and egoism, yeah, that needs to come to an end, yeah. And obviously, the society and politics need to set the frame conditions, yeah, to enable this, yeah. And then all these small snail perspectives, yeah, which do not see the complete picture, then will vanish, yeah. And they're urged then to cooperate, yeah.
Thank you so much, Ralph. When it's to be implemented, or it's already in implementing? That is the last question we will take. The implementation question.
What's the implementation?
Whether it's going to be implemented and when.
Okay. So this is the first project in a series of projects. Yeah, we're going to undertake. Yeah, share it till the end of next year. There will be this paperwork done. So the concepts, yeah, and the receipts, yeah, how to do it. Yeah, this will be then delivered to the government, yeah, who they ask for something like this, yeah, how to implement it and realization plan. And based on this, hopefully the following projects address implementation then, yeah. So at least the ports participating, they see the need, yeah, to invent themselves in a new way, because the old business is vanishing then, yeah. And having this idea that ports can have a major role in urban supply, yeah, which is currently, as I said, not the case. Then, yeah, this is those are the driving forces. Yeah, so there are players, yeah, in this field, yeah, which have essential interest, yeah, to do it. That's the reason why they're in the project, yeah, to do the things in a new way. And the others, yeah, they need a little bit of pressure, yeah, and how to do it, that will be very interesting. So I will be glad in a year or two to show you the success of the project or my complete disappointment, yeah.
So we go on with our next guest speaker, and it's going to be Professor Haydar Mecit. The title is Realizing Sustainable Smart Cities with IT Platforms and Real-World Labs. Who is Professor Mecit? In 2009, the Bochum University of Applied Sciences has appointed Germany's first professor for e-mobility. And you can know who that person might be. With a newly developed study program, Sustainable Development, an innovative new course was introduced for future engineers with social and economic understanding. The endowed professorship for urban energy and mobility solutions of Haydar Mecit is another Germany's first that again underlines the priority of sustainability action. Haydar Mecit has 13 years experience in e-mobility, transport, energy and infrastructure, working in international enterprises as research and development, innovation, or sales strategy expert. During his studies and business work, he lived in the USA and Japan. Since 2019, he is pursuing smart city R&D at his university. Here, he is focusing on integrating IoT sensors and open source IT platforms for smart energy and mobility use cases, developing solutions in real-world living labs in an interdisciplinary and multi-sectoral base. Aita is an alumnus of Fraunhofer Research and Development Society, the German Academic Scholarship Foundation, and the German government advising think tank Stiftung Neue Verantwortung. Mr. SPaCiH, it's our pleasure to have you here, and please take the stage. It's all yours.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for the nice introduction and the brief introduction. Hello to everybody from Germany. And yeah, let's just start, and I hope I get that Zoom doing the right thing. And if you should see
Yes.
now a Star Wars game, that should be wrong. If you see my screen, that should be right. So let's see. I tried to put that over on my main. So how many people do we have now, right now?
Right now we have 35.
Okay, great.
In total, yeah.
Okay. So let's get into presentation mode, and yeah. So what we're gonna cover today, I would like to introduce to you why we need sustainable cities. So what's the need for it? And then we will go on, and I would like to show you the challenges that cities face now and in future. So you could ask, why could smart cities be sustainable cities? I hope you get an answer by the end of that presentation. And then furthermore, how do sustainable smart cities and so-called real-world labs, so these are for us as researchers in the living surrounding labs that we want to analyze, and how could they look like? I would like to introduce that. And by the end, to show you, since I have the background of a computer scientist and also mechanical engineer, I would like to show you what platforms and the platform economy why it plays such an important role for realizing this. So the first thing, I hope you don't get annoyed, but it's still the question, is it hot in here, or is that the climate change? So what we are seeing is, and it doesn't matter who you ask, and the majority of researchers jointly all over the world realize by just measuring that global warming is really happening. So the CO2 emissions by humans are a main factor for this. And this is called the so-called human man-made greenhouse effect. So since weather records began, 2020 was the second warmest year overall, so last year. The trend is also clear. The last 6 years have also been the 6 warmest years globally. So what does that mean for me? For instance, as a German inhabitant, what happened last July here? I will show you. On the left-hand side, you see a beautiful area near to us, about 80, 90 kilometers, usually in summer in July, and then you see a huge flooding in Germany. Maybe you saw it also in the newspapers. And a large territory within 2 states looked like this. And it's unimaginable, but if you see how the ground is just breaking away underneath your shoes, you will have an idea how people has suffered. But not only people has suffered, they lost their houses, also more than 170 people died, actually. And a lot are still missing. So Financial Times had the headline that climate change is blamed for this devastating floods in Germany. And I mean, this is something I really believe. And even if you don't believe in it, it's a good idea to reduce CO2 emissions, because you should stop burning things, even if you think about who is burning it now. So if we look at the biggest emitters, what you recently heard a lot it is about China. But this is if you look at the countries. There is a second point of view. If you look at per capita, this means what do I and my neighbor and everybody is emitting. And this has to do something with the way of our living, what car we are driving, how do we travel to work, how do we travel to some nice islands, do we do that or not? So as you see here, India then is at the lowest point, the US is at the highest point. So what happens also is it's pretty much getting full in here, besides it's getting hot in here. The present urbanization shows, like last year was very interesting. It was the first time that more people lived in cities all over the world than in rural areas. But if we look into the future, in the next years, most of the people will live in East Asia and Africa. Do you have an idea why? It is pretty simple. We are healthy and we are living in a very wealthy environment. So what people are doing is enjoying their lives. So they are stop making babies. So these babies, and as you see, the birth rates like in Germany and Japan and also Italy are the lowest ones. This is different in East Asia and Africa. So there, what we will see are mega cities. So what is mega city? First of all, still, if we say that a lot of people are living in cities, only 1% of the Earth's surface are cities. But since the most people living there, this is strongly affecting climate change. Why? Because 75% of world's energy is consumed in cities, and they emit 80% of greenhouse gases. So we see that cities are problematic, and cities should also be the place for solution. So what can we do? I think that cities should be considered as the brains of our economic system. So cities should also be places of creativity and joint development efforts. I would like to show you what we at the Bochum University of Applied Science and in our area, what we are thinking about that. So first of all, we have the climate change and the urbanization that we have talked about. So now we are getting in the so-called smart city, a city that I would like to translate the word smart as digital, being digital and connected. So the development of novel, innovative IoT, this means Internet of Things technologies and IT platforms related to information community technologies will increase the efficiency. That's what I'm believing. But for further development of cities, it is really important to have a look on the structural infrastructure of the cities, of the measures, and how the digital infrastructures are. We're in Germany, but this is not a point that we can have a glance on it. So it is a way to get an optimization. So why are people asking for smart city? If you ask yourself, what is it about? I would like to point you to the technology trends and the city administration. So city administrations means municipal authorities. You lost your driving license or you got a new one, you go there. You get a baby, so you go there. You want to build up your own house, you go to the city administration. So the people looking for all the things in the city I will introduce. First of all, the technology trends. One major thing is the Internet of Things. The very, very simple example is your fridge. In former times, a fridge was it was cooling down my beer, everything fine. Now the fridge starts to be connected to the internet. The thing goes into the internet and it tells me you're running out of beer. And then the next thing is thanks to Amazon dash buttons, I will order one or the fridge will order itself. So this is the trend. What we know is smart mobility like Uber. Uber in the US or other places in the world wouldn't be possible without connected cars, but not the car is connected in that case, the driver with a smartphone. And underneath there is the so-called platform for Uber where your smartphone is connected and you start looking for a driver. So the same thing we are seeing in smart energy, but that's not so popular to have renewable energies. I will talk about that later. And as you know, what are they doing with our data? Amazon, Facebook, Google or Apple, they're using big data algorithms to take some advantages out of the data. I will also talk about that later, what that does mean also if you use artificial intelligence. So this is now a lot of bingo words. This is a lot. And then you have your municipal authorities who is looking after the infrastructure, the facility management, the traffic, the wastewater. And I don't know how it is in the rest of the world, but I tried to get a new driving license because my sister who's living in Scotland lost it. And it took me 6 months. It took me 6 months because nothing was digitized. And municipal authorities within the European Union, UK is not there anymore, but still they're not connected. And the driving license I got, it really took 2 days, but it took 6 months to inform the municipal authorities who only knew fax and email. Emails they don't check. So I'm used to get things fast. So this could be considered a technology push. And what is lacking is a public market tool. So the municipal authorities are doing that, but the inhabitants, you and me, we ask for it. So researchers start with a definition. So there are plenty ones. Let's talk about what we as my researcher think. We would like to use smart cities to protect the natural environment resources. We want to ensure the quality of life, like the high standard that we have, but also promoting social and technological development in new cities, in rural areas. We want to ensure the competitiveness of the economic development for our present and future generations and mankind. So we believe that the facilitation of digitization, and I call it connectedness in a city, is contributing to these goals. One thing is ICT, information and communication technology, and the IoT approach. Think about the fridge who is talking to you, the Internet of Things, because various things will get into the internet, and once you derive the information and the data, you can benefit. So I would like to give you 3 examples. You could later on click on these links. So you see here in the left-hand side Vienna in Europe, you see in the middle Singapore and also Barcelona. They have pretty much a lot of cool smart city projects, but as you see also with the pictures, they are looking different. So you start asking what do they have in common and what differs them, and what can you learn from them? Is there a jointly usable approach? For instance, like for use cases, you want to have more sustainability in, like the public transport, mobility, and the energy supply. So I would like to introduce you what we are doing in Herne. This is a small city in Germany. And I can tell you that this is a city in Europe. So we'll fly to Europe here. Then here you see Germany. And then we are going to the left of Germany, the western part. So the western part, this is its own state that Professor Kuron talked about, and I am living here. I'm just talking to you from this point in the so-called rural area. This area was famous for coal mining and steel making. So that's the reason why the cities here look like this, and we now fly into Herne. And you see, what you first see is what? You don't see many trees. So you see a lot of dense built houses, people, and also streets. And there is also, like here would be some businesses. And then you see here an ellipse I would like to talk about. Does anyone have an idea what this bluish thing is? These are solar cells or PV, photovoltaic cells for generative energy generation. And also you have here 7 houses with their own solar cells, their own PV power plant for generating electricity. So this ellipse, and in it, that building was in the 90s the world's largest rooftop PV installation. I didn't knew that, although I lived all my life here in this area, but it was in the front of my nose. And this was a former coal mine area, and it didn't look that nice. So 30 years after that, they built up this building to show how a building could be intelligently steered and also have a nice and inviting inside. So it is here as a colleague who is explaining to the people the solar cells, how you can utilize energy, not burning fossil fuels. Then I told you about these 7 houses. These are so-called prosumer homes. So prosumer homes are homes generating their own, producing their own electricity for privately owned consumers, prosumers. And what we did is for IoT, Internet of Things, we installed these. On the top right, you see a weather station that is connected to the internet. And it measures the temperature and humidity, that's fine. But what's interesting is the sunshine. You got an idea why, because if the sun is shining, the PV is generating energy. And the rainfall, because also prior to this, you heard that it's pretty cold in Germany right now. And if you have rainfall and the degree is falling underneath 0 degrees Celsius, you get ice. So this is interesting for mobility. We had first 2 locations, but now we have up to 11 locations where we installed in a dense network these weather stations. And our goal is to have all above the city about 60 weather stations near to so-called prosumer homes that generate their own electricity. And here on the right-hand side, you see a car, also to charge your own electric car. To be more independent, from the left-hand side, this is the sign for the icon for having electricity from the grid that is in our state more heavily based on coal. So there is an approach that we are believing in, and it's quite easy. We call it the 3-level approach to smart city projects, where we want to utilize data and use it. So what we do first is we get all these data from weather stations, from these prosumer homes, but this could be also e-scooters, or what makes the most data, your mobile phone. So we want to collect them. We do it with platforms, and then we want to show the data. Collecting data, have an idea of if you Google something, then you have a server, and then you ask for it. And this is the server for a city or the IT platform. We use the open source IT solution of Fiverr. This is a foundation, and it's for free to use it for cities. And you have the advantage that you don't have a vendor login. So this means that you don't sell yourself to Microsoft or something else like Siemens. So visualizing data, we believe, is the key to not only understand that there is no more beer in the fridge, but also to think about how is the logistic to get the beer into the city and into my fridge. And we don't see it only in combination with businesses and municipal authorities and universities. We want to have also the inhabitants, people living there, because Smart City 1.0 was technology driven and led by technologies, like the solution for a business to get nice logistics for having, I don't know, a trolley full of beer. Now, Smart City 2.0, referred to this source here, is city-driven and technology-enabled. So the municipal authorities start asking for it. So this is the public market pull I talked before. And this is that not only businesses make decisions, and our goal is Smart City 3.0. We want to have stakeholders. This means people who are thinking and working in the area of a smart city. And we want to have also the citizens, like in Germany, it is called the smart people city approach, because the cities are about how we live there and how we consume things. So we want to use this with what we call with a digital twin smart city approach with PPP projects. That means public and private partnerships. So on the first, how do we do that? We have the real city and its facilities where we live in. So we again have this step number one. For use cases, we use sensors, like for the environment, weather stations. For the e-scooters, GPS sensors. And for photovoltaics, to get that connected and to learn, measure how they produce energy. So here the representation of an IoT device weather station. On the second hand, the platform. This is key to get the data in one hand. So it is like a city like Herne or Chicago or Timbuktu has its own, I would say, platform like Amazon, where Amazon is for buying and selling things and the logistics behind it. And this platform would be for the city, because then once you have that, you could dive into energy and mobility. Look what's driving and how is the weather, how is the energy producing. Here you see very small dashboards that we have developed. And the thing that we want to reach is, we call it the Smart City R&D Lab, is we want to invite people, like here in this setting. 2 persons are looking at mobility within the city, these orange lines, how e-scooter have moved from A to B. And our vision on our project is to connect e-scooters as a local energy solution for first and last mile with public transport. Because public transport has the negative thing, it doesn't park in front of my yard. It doesn't bring me to the door of my office. So to think about getting out of the bus, having your e-scooter reserved with your mobile phone, and then just get into it like you would take an Uber. So what we want to do is we use these data and we work together with municipal authorities. Like in this case, you see the area of the city of Herne, and we build up a digital twin. So we can then go into simulations. I will try to, so you see these little e-scooter things. So we want to simulate mobility within the city with this AI platform. And we work together with the municipal authorities. Then that's an example from the smart city software provider Esri, but we want to also show this in 3D, because some people, it's beneficial to give them a vision. So what we build up here again, so here these are these 7 houses that I talked about in our own virtual reality surrounding. And what we want to do is, I want to show the fridge with the beer. No, sorry. I want to show the weather station, and that at this local point, it is 12 degrees, the sun is shining, and the PV is producing enough electricity for this home. And we can even measure single clouds, because we have a very dense weather station network. So it's all about IoT. But then we do not forget the people. We want to invite the people to imagine what this data is capable of. On the top hand right side, you see again about these houses. Here they are printed in 3D. You hold an Apple iPad, and you see then the energy flows within this little houses. And this is representing the real-time data having there. Or you use VR glasses. This is not a good solution for everybody. Therefore, we use also the augmented reality, these iPad solutions. But with these, you can really travel through this 3D world. So again, you see that having these smart city approaches and underneath the IT platforms, digging into real world labs, this is an approach where I can say after 2 years of R&D, it's very fruitful, and I would invite you to further questions.
Thank you so much, Professor Matrit. It was really very inspiring, especially with this tablet thing on the top right-hand side. I found it very interactive and very inspiring to play around in the Futurium Museum. Indeed, they had it exactly that way. So I liked the idea a lot. So yeah, once again, thank you so much. Dear participants, please, it's your time to ask questions. Amazing presentation from Erica coming. Interesting presentation, great informed presentation. So basically the comments are there. And we have the first question. In fact, the smart city is more effective because you can discover the problems at the moment and correct it at once, right? And this is possible using IoT and artificial intelligence in cooperation with everyone. All they use smartphone data and the interconnected urban systems. But the needs of all will attend the needs of each one. How to cope with the differences of particular interests and the social ones?
Yeah, so as Professor Melkonyan introduced me, it was called the endowed professorship. So this means something like a scholarship. And Germany's first was that this city that we call our real world lab and its municipal authorities, in top the mayor of the city, has made this professorship possible about smart city. So I would answer that it is important. The key to the people is the mayor, because the mayor's first, he's in charge of that his people living in the city have a good living. So there are platforms, and I don't mean now IT platforms, but platforms of getting into discussions like the political democratic organizations within a city, where also not only professors, but also highly interested normal inhabitants could participate in our democracy. They are invited, like I was invited in such a, it's called a political branch, like about mobility. And then we are invited as R&Ds, and then people and also their representatives from the different political parties. They asked me, like, some people are fed up with the e-scooters that you have just started in the city, and how could that be solved? But we are then talking about, like, in this, I think you still see the picture, we have made some areas where you are not allowed to park. You are not allowed to park near to graveyards, near to rivers, near to hospital emergency rooms. So we invite people, go into the discussion, and I think this is the best way.
Yes, thank you. Another question is going to the direction of wind power system. What do you think where to cater the wind power system in the future smart cities?
I digged a lot into it when I was working for companies like utilities and mechanical engineering companies. Wind turbines is more for outside the cities. So wind turbines, if you have it in the city, they have to be smaller, but then they're less effective. So in Germany, maybe you heard about our approach that we want to be CO2 free for energy generation within the next years. We will use very strong wind turbines in the North Sea, and then having electricity lines to the south. But in the city, what you can really do, because you have a lot of rooftops, is solar. I believe in solar, and what we have here, what we will have is these houses have their own, I would say, power banks. There are batteries where the sunshine energy, I would say, is stored. And by night, if I come back home and want to charge my car or something else, then it is returned. So we call it local storage in combination with photovoltaics. Is something that works for cities, but also a colleague of mine is doing projects with Africa, I think in Ghana, and they're using it also for rural areas, because in where you don't have streets, you can have mopeds, motorcycles, and it's easier to charge them with electricity that you just made in your village than to find somewhere a gas station in Africa, in India, or in South America, areas where we need more cities, and we will have more cities.
Professor SPaCiH, very good comment on your previous comment or answer. And with that, we will close this one. We need a strong and effective democracy. Let's believe in our politicians.
Yeah.
That's a good thing. Yeah. Just very shortly, if you can comment to the very last question. How the internet is basic smart city criteria? How to prioritize?
I hope that
I didn't understand.
I hope
I
I
that you
understand it well. So I think this is, like I said, that smart city platform is key to getting from a use case to some beneficial business case, or for people beneficial case. Like if you don't have an internet connection, then it's not possible to have data. And this is, for instance, the reason why Amazon, Google, Facebook, and also SPaCiH from Elon Musk are trying to bring internet to all over the world, to Africa, to Alaska, with satellites or with balloons. Maybe you heard about that. So I would still say smart means for me digital and connected. Without internet, you don't have a connection.
Thank you so much, Professor SPaCiH. We will move on. Maureen, your question will be answered hopefully during the working group if Professor SPaCiH or one of his co-workers are still with us. Okay.
Okay, thank you. And I will try to answer the questions in the chat.
Okay, that's great. That's another good opportunity. Thank you so much. Okay, everybody, it's my pleasure to go further, and now we will have another very interesting presentation from Dorothea Bateva. The title is Curbside Management, How Focusing on Space Management Can Enable Cities to Handle New Mobility and Reduce Private Transport. So who is our guest? Ms. Bateva is a Frankfurt-based professional operating as a consultant, facilitator, and coach for corporates and social entrepreneurs since 2011. Since early 2019, she has been working at Deutsche Bahn digital partner DB Systel, developing a new curbside management service offering. The focus is on enabling cities to better understand its mobility requirements and get most out of their curb. Smart cities, green cities, and today's cities all need better use of space and smarter handling on mobility matters. Doro, you have the word. It's my pleasure to give you the chance to present us the very exciting curbside management system. I will stop here sharing.
Thank you, Annie. Thank you very much for having me here, for inviting me. And I'm happy to first do the technical part and share my screen. I hope it should work. You see our website? No, not yet.
We see several cars.
Several cars.
I prefer the first one. That's a nice one.
Okay, but now you should see my presentation. That's where I was heading for. Okay, so yeah, hello once again. And as Annie said, I would like to give some insights on curbside management. And as Annie also presented me, just briefly here another comment. So yes, I'm a co-founder of this DB Curbside service offering at Deutsche Bahn's digital partner, DB Systel, and also member of the Women in Mobility Network that I would highly recommend for all female German or European participants here, because that's the network that brought Annie and me together as we met 2 years ago, just before the pandemic. So let's look at the curbside. What is the curb? This is the curb, but the curb is also this, where cars park, where where maybe the curbs are blocked to not be used because maybe the inhabitants need it. It's also a spot for deliveries, but it's also a place where people spend their time within a city. So curbside management really takes care to bring a fair and demand-oriented use of space. And we've heard a lot about digital twin in the prior presentation, and we will continue talking about digitalization at this part. So let's start with looking at urban streets with a curbside perspective. You see there's more colors coming up and it's already a bit digitalized. It's really focusing on who uses the curb and what the needs of the people or the vehicles using the curb is. So it's another example. It adds information when you look from a curbside perspective on all these needs and also on the purpose of the curb, let's say it like that. And curbside management really tries to optimize the way the space is used, so you have less traffic and the best livable cities for the inhabitants. I would like to dig deeper into this by the example of DB Curbside Management, because this is exactly the field we worked ourselves through in the past 2.5 years when we started with this topic, and then move on to further examples. So looking at the challenges of urban mobility, today we see very currently the lack of parking space by the curbside on one hand, and all the traffic jams and emission problems on the other hand. And both of these are still bothering the cities, especially in the big cities in Germany, I can say. And but at the same time, we see new mobility services like the scooters. We see shared mobility, on-demand mobility rising, and it's out of question that we are moving to car-free cities with an increase in this micro shared mobility offers. So in order to be ready for that in the future, we believe it's important, and so do luckily more and more cities, to pilot launch measures that will make this handleable in the future. So here's just a brief view on the mobility market, because they're very different as in so many fields nowadays, opinions about new mobility. Maybe it's just a trend, the scooters are just trash and they will vanish, but the facts are really different. And here you can see the number of services in Berlin, and we've been monitoring these. Yes, there is consolidation on the market, but overall, these services are really in our cities and are being used, and the whole market is growing. And the nice part is that the cities understand that new mobility can be or must be part of the whole public mobility transport offer within cities. And having said that, let's look at the curbside again with this view. And why do we as Deutsche Bahn maybe look at it just to begin with? We're the biggest railway company in Europe, and we see the curb as the longest platform in town, because it's the place where mobility is ending or starting and switching. So it's from a mobility perspective, a very interesting space. And what do we see here? We see very different needs and requirements that all come together on this curbside. We see mobility providers on the left that ask themselves where they let their passengers on and off, and how the city with its very specific rules and the infrastructure is actually suitable for the offer. But we also see logistic companies that ask themselves where they can stop or drop off their deliveries. And it has already become normal, let's say, that they pay all the fees for standing on the street or on the bike lanes, which cannot be the solution. So, and here maybe the pressure, especially in this context, maybe is especially high, because the deliveries are continuously growing, and we don't only talk about personal deliveries or shipments, we talk about retail, construction site, hotels, restaurants. All these places need deliveries within cities. So the city needs to handle all these requirements and all this larger and larger number of questions that arise. And overall, they want to ensure safe streets, safe curbs, and also a good mobility offer for the citizens, who on the very end, or the most important actually, they want easy and local access to a mix of mobility services. And they look for chaos-free, clean cities with low congestion rates. And what we have decided, or one way to deal with curbside management, is to use digital tools to utilize the curbside, because we see a great chance to bring cities and municipalities together closer to the mobility providers. Because especially in the beginning, and still, I mean, that is improving, it has been seen as, oh, they're new providers, they're more threat than actually making our mobility offer better. So this tool really aims for bringing them together. And we have developed a tool called Curbside Cockpit that enables cities to observe, understand, and regulate the use of curb space for mobility within a city. And you can also try this tool for yourself. There is a free version online, but at this point, I would like to show you a brief look into this Curbside Cockpit. This is the tool that we've heard it before, digital twin, that is aiming to set the digital twin of what's happening in the streets. So with these tools, cities, we're here in Frankfurt, can observe their curbside. And speaking, we focused on mobility, shared mobility in the first step. Logistic is coming up next year. We have integrated and are constantly integrating more and more mobility providers, so the city can see where vehicles such as e-scooters are currently using up curb space. So this is the first step to understand what it's like, or to observe. In order to understand what's happening, we are building up more and more analytical tools, so the city can see how where the hotspots of the usage, if you take all, it's a lot of clouds, usage, for example, of scooters is happening, and then in communication and in digital, very data-based communication, they can talk with the mobility providers to maybe set up virtual stops that the providers again can put in their tools, so you as a user leave your scooter somewhere where it's not in the way and where actual demand is met. And the third part is the regulation part. The cities already today block, for example, parks, etc., for the usage by all these shared mobility vehicles. And we have developed this this monitoring or rule audit to see if these rules are met. And that's how we can look at vehicles that, for example, stand by the River of Main, which is not desirable. And maybe to give an outlook how this can be used in Lisbon, they have the rule that if this happens, for example, the service provider gets a notification and has 15 minutes to maybe solve the problem, or someone else takes the vehicle. If not, the city will take care of putting the vehicle that is maybe a threat at this point, or just creating chaos somewhere else, and charging the mobility provider. So that is a very nice example of how mobility providers and cities go hand in hand. And there are many other features. This is just a brief insight or look to show you how this tool works. On curb.deutschebahn.com, you can get a view for yourself. It has limited functions, but I think it helps understand or try out a bit. So what is very important, and I would like to emphasize, because when we talk about digitalization, we always talk about data, and data again is a topic that, especially in municipalities, in different many ways, is a very difficult topic that you need to carefully take care of. And that's why we, as the digital partner of Deutsche Bahn, said it's actually a topic we should approach because we can ensure all this GDPR compliance and all the security that comes with it, because it is data from these vehicles, from these providers, from trips that need to be taken used with percussion. So what is really what tools like these are helping for is to communicate both long-term regulation, just as don't park your vehicles by the river, but also temporary regulations. And this is very interesting when we talk about maybe a new or a crash happening in town where you really want everything out of the way. It could be because a demonstration is being held. And the good thing is that both, I mean, the mobility providers do it, service providers do it anyway. They want their offer where it's needed, but now the city can have a talk in it too. So they can set service level agreements and have certain spots in the city really, for example, not only the Metropolitan, the downtown area, but areas that are maybe not well connected to public transport, they can use that. So yeah, but the fields of applications are very broad, as I said, and I would like to show some examples from, starting from our project. We launched this month at a station called Stuttgart-Vaihingen. It's a commuter station or a highly frequented commuter station. And the vision was to have a real mobility hub, not just a station where you can go to the train or leave the train and move on, but where you really find the next trip or come from the next trip. And this is how it started. The station management looked at the site and decided or discussed, and that's important, with a lot of different views, perspectives, what the needs are, and defined this area, this mobility hub. And it also decided to do it visually. It is a possibility to do all this mobility hubs visually, but you can also do it virtually. It doesn't matter. In this case, it was important that it's visible, and I think it's important because we have this transformation in the city sites that this also helps. And this is what it looks like now. On the other hand, or the station management is using our tool to see if it's the mobility service that is needed, and taking care that it all works, and continuously learning what the needs are, and improving the on-site offer. So that's one example. Here's another example on the left from the Netherlands, where we go more into the logistic part, and there's coding for curbs that offer tools that or solutions for smart zones for deliveries, which is a really interesting topic. I can't wait to dig deeper into next year. We see it in Italy, where as in many cities is being discussed, car-free zones or car-free cities. That, of course, requires, or in Barcelona, the mega blocks, where certain areas are not used just, I say, randomly or freely, as it maybe was for many years. And with all this restriction comes the need to take care of the need of the ones who really shall or want to use the curbside. In the US, it's again very different, and this is also why it's a very local topic, I'd say, because there you have the colors of the curb, which is also a way of visual categorization of curb use. And another example, now with the pandemic, it was also necessary, or a nice effect that the restaurants used the space that were formerly used by cars. So this change of how the urban areas are used will all affect curbside management. And we see it also for pickups. That's another thing, that people don't enter stores but pick the stuff they buy up. So there are really, really different perspectives and topics, but what is really necessary, and I think the next picture will show, is that you need to, we call it do a digital inventory of what the curb is used for now. And maybe someone thinks, okay, that's data the city has. Yes, but it's not, it's divided between the different areas within a city. You have urban planning, you have traffic planning, you have strategic planning, and there's information also not always up to date. And it is hugely important and necessary to put this together and get more data, as much data as possible, because then in the next step, and we see this on the right, you can see how this space is used. You can measure it, and then you can optimize it, because seeing cars by the street don't necessarily say how many people you serve. And this is the shift in mindset that is coming with curbside management. I don't want to go deep into this, but it's a nice example from Toronto that also said from the strategic level, that is also extremely important, a hierarchy of curbside functions. So you see this topic is approached from different ways. And we at Deutsche Bahn started with taking care of the scooters because they were really flooding our urban spaces. But it's really a holistic view to see the effects. And the last I want to show the benefit of looking at this holistically with a very simple example. Let's assume a city changes the purpose of just 3 parking lots downtown into flexible mobility zones, including micromobility parking zones, delivery zones, and drop-off pickup zones, as well as the short-term parking. You can see that this is really a very simple example, but it shows that the amount of persons per day served is rising extremely. And that is the logic that you want to go to. We have a lot of challenges to face, from the data aspect, data regulation, to all the rules and regulations that apply, but it's a transformation that's heading. And the opportunities are really huge, because looking at not only shared or on-demand mobility and logistics, we also look at autonomous mobility that will come in the near future, especially when talking about smart cities. So you need ways, tools, mindsets to monitor and understand and regulate this part. And this brings urban planning and transportation planning together. So we are very happy to have started here with the shared mobility and moving on to building a more and more platform to use this. And the drive for all of this is here are just some of the opportunities you get through, or also the visions with curbside management, is really the integration of new mobility into public transport. So making the life or the mobility for the citizens and the visitors within a city better. It aims for avoiding chaos and really gives a very clear chance to do so. It's switching to data-based insight for urban and traffic planning. So from the heads into data, or combined with data. So it's making private cars obsolete. That's what we like to say. It's a long way, but the better mobility there is within a city offering, there is within a city, and the better the space is used, less chaos we have, less traffic jams, congestion, and just a better urban space. And for the city, it's something that in Germany will take a bit, but it's also a way to monetize the use of urban space, because we will have that when cities become car-free, but it's also a way to really, because there is so much need, so many requirements for this urban space, to monetize the use for companies that use those services. So overall, curbside management helps to a more demand-oriented mobility and is the basis for future mobility services. And I always say that because it was really the initial idea when we started at the beginning of 2019, when we're thinking, okay, autonomous cars, delivery drones, even more requests for the same space. So if that doesn't go hand in hand with the digital inventory or monitoring, it won't work, because these vehicles need need digital data and also on-site data. So yeah, that's been a little bit of insights from what we have been working on from curbside management, and I'm happy to answer questions or comments if there are.
Thank you so much, Dora. Very interesting and very inspiring presentation. I still remember 2 years ago when we met in Frankfurt and you presented this idea, curbside management. I was really very much fascinated and I thought we need to collaborate on this. And that's really very nice to have you here with us.
Thank you.
There are some comments coming in. The question from Assam. We have seen some colored roads in presentation. Are they really colored? And if yes, would it be plastic or traditional charcoal roads?
So there was the first picture was an animated photo or a digital photo. But, I mean, in the US, you have the curb markers that are in color. So let's see how that develops. I think it's a very smooth way in comparison to this huge signs that sometimes confuse people more.
Yeah, right. Yeah, there is another long story coming from Carlos. You did a management based on space, but would you improve this management based on time too? Like day or night bans for commerce providers? Or do you believe that time management has already been considered anyway on the curbside use? And there is another part in Brazil, you will have problem to forbid car parking in many commercial areas, but depending on the time, it can be more acceptable.
Well, I'm not sharing anymore, right? Yes. No. So this example with, I'll try again. With the 3 parking spots that were transformed is exactly trying to shift the mind towards that. But I just mentioned signs. They are very static up to date. So also there's also this development that they're digitalizing, and then you can also build or change the signs depending on time. It is something that the strategic planners or transportation planners within cities are very open to. Generally, but in order to really have it happen on the streets, it takes a lot of regulation change, and I think the process has been started. But in Germany, at least, you don't use it. You could use it way more, but that transformation started.
Okay, thank you so much. Until some more questions are coming. I have another question. Indeed, I liked very much one of the comments just in the very last slide when you said we could think of monetizing urban spaces. I like the idea a lot because 4 years ago when I was in New York, I came across to monetizing a tree. And I found it such a fascinating idea. So if a person cuts down the tree, he or she has to pay money for that because it is attached a specific value because of kind of taking CO2 or this kind of cleaning process. And I liked it a lot. So if you say we need to monetize urban spaces, that means also we are attaching a social value to it. And that would be very difficult. So my question would be, how can we start this kind of problem?
I found that the aspect you mentioned, Annie, also very interesting because that's with all our resources that we just take for granted. And this, if it's the tree or the space within a city, is part of that. What we're looking at more, and I think that's maybe with the Brazil example from Brazil, is that you have hotels or supermarkets that have this large parking areas that could be used for mobility services and then charge. So here you have someone else getting the money, but it's the same logic that applies to the city. So if it's a, we have that in Los Angeles or San Francisco, somewhere in California, they already have this thing, and Uber pays $7.50 for a stop, for a pick up or drop off on the site, and that is a lot. So the start of your of what you will pay for the Uber ride is $7.50, because that is what the city gets for the use of urban space. So these are the mechanics that that we're talking about when looking at curbside management. But yeah, the social aspect is of course very interesting, and we have. We did some brainstorming on how you could make an algorithm for the cities to have a dynamic pricing of the use of curb. because that would also change then deliveries by night. I think that's one of the most simplest examples. But yeah, we're at the very beginning of that.
If you need any help in dynamic pricing, just let me know. We have a professor here who is doing exactly dynamic pricing. Yeah, so thank you. Changing minds first and then changing spaces. That's true. Making private cars obsolete is a great idea through curbside management. Do you have cities that have already transformed to this setup from being very dependent on private cars?
Well, it's a process, and we have with different aspects. You have this. I mentioned the mega blocks. Is it mega blocks in Barcelona? So you have really blocks within the city that are car free, but they still take care that you can briefly stop, for example, to leave your errands from shopping, or take people with disabled people or deliveries. But that is very. So yeah, Barcelona is a really nice example, but it all starts always very small and then getting bigger. So this is an example I particularly like. In Germany, we're rather at the beginning of this process.
Let's take the very last one. There are in between many comments that the presentation was great, or the ideas are really great. So I'm saying this in a collective manner. And the very last one here happens the same. There are some experimental areas with a code color in the streets, trying to introduce it different and defined use in the streets, as well as parklets in the commercial sector. And the comment, girl power in mobility, very good. Thanks a lot, Dorothea.
Yeah, great.
Okay, thanks for all the information. I love graphics and ideas, and applause, applause, applause. So
Thank you
lots of
for your interest in the topic and for inviting me.
Thank you so much. And just a short question before we go further to our Orga team. Do we have a very nice picture of Doro before we let her go? Not yet. Okay. Would anybody take care of this?
Actually, I have already taken a picture of her.
Perfect.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Doro, for your time, and
thank you.
See you soon.
Yeah, enjoy the winter school, everyone.
Thank you so much.
Bye.
Bye-bye. Okay, everybody. So we are coming to our last presentation of today, and it's my very, very special pleasure to introduce you to our very old and good friend, old in friendship, not in the age, Tim Gruchmann. He is going to talk about sustainable supply chain management in destinations, a perfect match. Who is Tim? Professor Tim Gruchmann is professor of logistics at Westküste University of Applied Sciences in Heide since 2019, and a member of German Institute for Tourism Research. His research interests lie within employee and customer-oriented logistics and sustainable supply chain management. His research was published in international peer-reviewed journals, including the International Journal of Logistics Management, Journal of Cleaner Production with me, Supply Chain Management, and International Journal of Production Economics, Journal of Industrial Ecology. So those are the very impactful journals of our nowadays supply chain and logistics subject. So Tim, it's my pleasure to give you the stage, and we are very much looking forward to your presentation.
Yeah, thank you very much, Annie, for this kind introduction. And I'm really happy to be here. Second time. I was trying to remember when I was attending the last summer school. I think it was 3 or 4 years ago. And yes, hopefully this winter school won't be the last winter or summer school I can make a contribution to. So, yeah.
With great pleasure. You are always more than welcome.
Thank you, Annie. All right. Yes, I brought a bit of a different topic to you today. And this is coming from my background, actually. as Annie said, I'm coming from a business background. So I did research in sustainable logistics, sustainable supply chain management, and always was looking at those issues from a company perspective, how companies might transform their own operations or the operations of the supply chains they are located in. And then when I was going to Heide 3 years ago, I was talking to colleagues who did also sustainability research, but from a tourism perspective. And what we figured out was that we were talking about the same things or had the same goals, but we were using different terminology. We had different priorities, and yeah, so we had this idea, or at least we figured out the phenomena that we are still very much into our disciplines, into our silos, and this brought us to the idea that it might be interesting to use concepts we have in one discipline and apply it to another discipline and see if it's going to work out, if we have some, let's say, win-win situations, or if we figure out also sometimes situation where it's not working out. And when Annie asked me to do a presentation here, I also was thinking, okay, maybe we have the same issue between business and tourism, as well between maybe business and urban planning, mobility. And of course, we have this clear connection between mobility and logistics, and maybe also last mile logistics and urban planning. But do we really think beyond that? Do we really think about maybe the supply chains, which are one layer in a city destination? And therefore, I thought it might be interesting to show you this piece of research. And very importantly, I haven't conducted it just by myself. I got big support by Maria Top. She was a master student here at Heide, and I think she's also here in the Zoom call. So, hey Maria, and please correct me if I'm telling something wrong. So yes, just interrupt me, or maybe you can also talk a little bit after this presentation. So now I will share my screen, of course. And let's see if I get the technical part running.
Yeah, so, it's running, and I was thinking that you are not going to share any presentation. That could be also something new here. We didn't have it yet.
Of course, yeah. Well, I think it's there are some people who can really talk without any visualization, but for me it's a bit more yeah, relaxed if I have some slides where I can read something from. So yeah, so we have a bit of a, let's say, theoretical let's say topic right now, and maybe this is also interesting for some of you who might think about pursuing a PhD or already do a postdoc, and there we need this kind of also theoretical questions, and therefore this might be also give you some triggers to think about how you could also maybe use this idea for your research. So of course, I also have an agenda. If it's working out, yep. For this talk, so it's a bit more structured like a scientific talk, and we also presented this at a conference, or we want to present it at a conference. So I want to give you a bit of a motivation. I want to show you the methodology we were using, the analysis of the literature we did, what we came up as a result with a theoretical framework, and of course what we kind of discovered from this trial to apply the sustainable supply chain management concept in tourism destinations. And including in this also city destinations. And then hopefully we can have a bit of a short discussion. And as it still is kind of work in progress, so maybe you also have some nice ideas how we can progress with this topic. All right, and references, of course. So research question was, how can sustainable supply chain management be applied and why is it important, of course? And what we see is that sustainability is becoming more and more important also for tourism, not just because of its huge impact on environment and sustainability, but also on the other, from a business perspective, and of course with the Corona pandemic making doing businesses even more challenging, also to think about sustainability from an economic perspective to sustain the business model in the future. What we also see is that tourism customers are becoming more, let's say, they have higher expectations. They are looking for more sustainable offers, higher quality tourism offers, and of course they are becoming more aware on their impact when they're doing holidays, particularly when they use a plane, for example, and the CO2 emissions which are related with that. Similar topics, as I said, or similar goals also in the supply chain community. So supply chains are also looking to have a long-term sustainable transformation, which is also important to look at their suppliers from raw material extraction to manufacturing of products and service, and then of course at the consumption stage at the customers. And of course, it's not just stressing inefficiency to be more economically sufficient or efficient. So in the end, it's not just about thinking how can I, for instance, reduce my consumptions of fossil fuels, but also how maybe can I even make those emissions redundant, what we already heard with the many interesting examples we heard in the last presentations. And yeah, for tourism, for the tourism sector as well, and it's I guess the same for urbanization as well. So we have this globalization, we have the rapid growth of the industry, and we need to do something. And what we did is we thought about how can a tourism supply chain look like? And what we're thinking about was how can we use this very linear or maybe network perspective, and how can we give it, let's say, a third dimension to bring it on a destination in an area, in a rural or urban area or region. And as we heard, many information on the rural region, for instance. So how could those tourism destination look like? And when we look at this, we see all the, let's say, actors we already know. So we have transportation providers, we have accommodation providers, we have shopping, dining, all the things you could imagine to do in a city. And of course, all those actors, and those are for us the first tier suppliers, they have second tier suppliers, so they need to be supplied with food, drinks, equipment, which of course causes all the logistics and mobility requirements we were already talking about. And the interesting thing was, so what is the focal company of a tourism supply chain? Who is in the end the actor who is governing the supply chain. And when we look at traditional supply chain, it's easy. It's the car OEM. When we look at automobile supply chains, it's the retailing company if we look at food supply chains. And if we look at tourism supply chains, it might be not so obvious. So we have this classical tour operators where you might book your journey, but we also see platforms coming to the fore. So we have Airbnb, we have completely online travel agents. And what we see is we have also other intermediaries. This could be digital platforms as well, but this is also actors like, and just want to write it down because I recognize I missed it, like so-called DMO, destination management organizations, which is sometimes private, sometimes public, which kind of take over the function of a maybe public governor, things like that, where a lot of activities come into one organization. And we asked then in the end, is this maybe one important actor which already applies practices for sustainable supply chain management? All right, so quickly on the methodology. As I said, it's going to be a purely theoretical study. So what did we do? We used a literature review, and just we wanted to see what is out there, and was there already some research on tourism and sustainable supply chain management. And this also would be a nice idea for the future to look really, is there some overlap between sustainable supply chain management and urban system science, so to say. So we're looking at research from the past 20 years, peer-reviewed journals in English. We are looking at one, very famous, mostly on one very famous database for publications. And we did a qualitative content analysis, tried to figure out if we can come up with a theoretical framework. So, and what you see is, and this is, I just open it, after a lot of reading titles, reading abstracts, removing duplicates, we were seeing that in the end, it's not too much out there. It's just 37 articles, which in the end don't just use sustainable supply chain management just at one bottom line or had a reference on this, but really thought about including this SSCM in the tourism sector. And what we also were seeing that mainly tourism research was taking this concept and introducing it to their discipline, while the other way around, from a business perspective, supply chain researchers did not really make research in this sector. And so at least a sign that there needs to be done in future from a research perspective. Also, what we were seeing, we had a really scattered picture. So those 37 papers came from 30 journals, 35 different authors, 21 different countries. So in the end, no real systematic research on this topic so far. All right. So, and as you can imagine, still 37 papers, a lot of content, and due to the time constraints, and I see I'm talking too much or too long, I just want to show you some spotlights, so to say, and I'd rather go then quickly to the discussion, which might be the most interesting part. So not surprisingly, we found a lot of green or social practices. So we were founding eco labels, which were certifying hotels for their reduced CO2 emissions. We were finding information for the customer, how to behave more sustainability. We found farm to table events where hotels were offering local or organic foods, things like that. So all the practices you already might have experienced by yourself, most likely. Also things like public policies, how to protect fragile areas, things like that. And of course, measures or practices to bring or to bridge the attitude behavior gap, so to bring the customer to pay for more sustainability. So maybe nothing really new, but still having this picture on, there's lots of going on in this sector, really to make the operations sustainable. We're also seeing, okay, it's still complex, it's still heterogeneous. Looking at the different actors, we have different priorities and sometimes even different opinions. So like those tensions and paradoxes, which sometimes come up with sustainability research. And there we thought, okay, there must be something else. And maybe this sustainable supply chain management concept needs to be adapted to better suit to this tourism field of research. And I'm just taking out 2 areas. One will be digitalization, where we already heard a lot about it. So I will be quickly going on to this. And the other one is, which you see here on the slide, is the role of education and knowledge management. So not just thinking about how you can trigger your customer, but also how you can trigger your suppliers, and maybe how they can turn to a more sustainable mode of transportation, for instance. Things like training, other demand management, which were coming up in this area. And on the other hand side, role of technology, which we heard already from the presentations before. So I will go on a bit more quickly. So what we did in the end, we were trying to put all those things together into one theoretical framework, and all the things we hearing about, so eco-labels, so we included in this box here. So on sustainable supply chain management practices in tourism, with the goal, of course, to be more economic, socio-economic, and ecological sustainable. It was quite interesting also to see that there were not too many purely social goals for sustainable supply chain management in tourism. So the main studies were talking about, the tourism as a source of income for a region, and of course the not always very good working conditions in this area. And what we were seeing is most problems here are companies don't have enough resources to apply or transform their businesses. When there are standards, sometimes hard to sometimes hard to adapt them to the specific area, and for some special areas there are not even standards out there. Most of the demand, although there are customers who want to travel more sustainable, there's still a lack of huge demand for this for this offers, and we still have a fragmented structures in those supply chains. In turn, if we can raise the demand, if we have higher public pressures, and if we see also a higher awareness of those issues, this will facilitate more SSCM practice in tourism. All right, so this is just an overview, and let's go to the discussion. And I just put it there, and maybe we can think a little bit about what this also might mean for the urban planning or urban system science. So first of all, what we see is what is really prominent studies in the business SSCM sector can also be found for this specific branch of tourism. So sustainability orientation, technological integration, collaboration, stakeholder management can be found there as well. However, what we see is that those practices are mainly realized by the actors we already knew. So hotels, tour operator, transport providers. And what we were seeing that those actors who should make the governments of a destination or an area, they have been hardly studied. So the question would be, how can we maybe also bring a mayor, for instance, to apply sustainable supply chain management practices? So this is with a big question mark behind it. So what we still see in this area, we have to think more from a system perspective and from a multi-level perspective, including the single company, the supply chain, the area or destination, and then of course the more governing environment around this destination to find more opportunities for tourism supply chain management. And of course, what is also not surprising, we often see different terminology. It's not clear if it's a supply chain, if it's a value chain, whatsoever. Other different researchers are talking from the same or different constructs or concepts. So, and what is a bit, of course, also a bit sad is so far tourism kind of lags behind of the advantage of other industries, which are more mature in this sector. What we, in comparing to this, looking from a tourism side, is we were seeing that most of those drivers here, which we are talking there, are coming from a very marketing orientation. And this is maybe similar to city destinations, because they need to market maybe the brand of their destination. And maybe it's it could be also an interesting brand development process to be a more sustainable city. And of course, having just this mainly marketing focus, tourism should also think about more how to address maybe their suppliers in their sustainable operations. On the other hand side, what marketing oriented sustainable supply chain is very good in is to include customers and to address their consumption behavior, and maybe also to be able to impact or at least facilitate a transformation in their customer habits. So what was interesting also, what to see is certifications did not really work out. They were even more confusing. So what we normally have is you have a label, you put it on your product or your service, and the customer, who is informed, of course, will change its behavior. Of course, this is not really working out in this area, and we were seeing that we need to have additional channels to bring information to the customer. So this is what I already said. So we need a more system perspective, and due to a look on the time, I'm interested about what you think, and maybe, and just maybe, we manage that somebody of you is unmuting his or her mic, and maybe just give a bit of a feedback also on an audio line. Of course, in the chat is fine as well, but I'm just wonder what you think about this idea. So do you know any sustainable supply chain management practices in your city? Do you think that those practices, like, just go back, just to give it in your practices, like labels, standards, reputation, commitment, technology orientation, that those can help to transform your sustainable supply chains in your city? What actors do we need to incorporate for sustainable supply chain management in tourism? Yeah, and maybe do you have any good examples? So is there anything from your opinion you might want to add?
Tim, thank you very much. Especially, thank you very much that you are encouraging people to unmute themselves and jump into the discussion, which I hope will be very active. And I suppose that it shouldn't be any problem for our participants just to unmute themselves and give their thoughts on this aspect. So go ahead, dear participants. It's your time to bring your perspective in. Nobody is. There is Carlos writing. Touristic area cities are more based on leisure practices and local supply chains than others. Aren't these reasons more suitable for sustainable practices? On the other hand, supply chains tend to be increasingly based on global basis, mainly when the number of tourists highly increase. Doesn't this damage the sustainability along the time, or it needs constantly adaptation? What are the challenges?
So this is an interesting point, and I think this is what is the crucial point. Maybe sometimes also comparing sustainable supply chains for products and for services. And in the end, what we see is the customer is more or less the product. And if the customer is traveling globally, also tourism supply chains are becoming more globally. Although, and that is the interesting, let's say, the interesting notion from this, the practices are still very local and very destination specific. And how we can bridge this local, do you know this? So the combination from global and local in this sector is, I think, really, really interesting. So I'm not sure, maybe, Maria, do you have something, because you did the study mainly, do you have maybe something you want to share? What was your kind of experience in, bringing those two concepts together, which not really might fit in the first glance?
Well, when I was reading the papers, there was, I think, almost nothing about cities. So it was more about rural areas. For example, in India, a lot of papers were from India and about India. So the point about cities, I didn't come across it at all, I think.
So do you think it would be worth to do more research on this, or is this due to the nature, let's say, of tourism, that the biggest marketing share is, let's say, leisure, beach, and maybe city tourism is just a small part of it?
Yeah, I think that's kind of the nature of tourism, that people want to escape the cities. So that's why I think city tourism might be very understudied in a supply chain focus, at least from my experience. But I think it would be very interesting to see our theories in a city context. It's nice to think about it.
Yeah, absolutely. If you have a look at the city of New York, who actually should be hosting us today, I can't imagine that tourism shouldn't be a problem there, especially from traffic point of view. That should be a very interesting thing, but also in general, the supply chain. You see, the good restaurants, for instance, especially in the cities, And if we take the tourism, cross-country tourism out and concentrate within the country tourism, that basically we have the small migrations from the rural areas into the city centers when it comes to eating, for instance. And that could be a very interesting point indeed to see how this food tourism could work in the cities, especially in the large cities. I find the idea really very, very good and very interesting.
All right. And of course, the other way around, if you change your city mobility concept, for instance, what does this have for an effect on the supply chains? And maybe some business models, of course, won't work anymore, which might be the goal to, you know, cut out the less sustainable ones. And yes. Okay, so just if you like, and I'm not sure, Annie, if we provide the slides. So I have a lot of limitations and we need to collect some empirical data. So someone who wants to help us with collecting data on city tourism for sustainable supply chain management, just contact us, and a lot of references. So if you like to see them, and then I hope I haven't stretched too much my time available.
Yeah, indeed. I was going to ask the question, especially direction to direction, Brazil and Singapore. If we take Singapore as a city and Rio de Janeiro as a city, those are the mega cities which are hidden by lots of tourists. So that's why I was going to ask about these issues, and I see right away from Brazil rather an not friendly approach to tourists. Indeed, these touristic areas became even more spoiled by the amount of tourists and not of the local inhabitants, the comment. Yeah, so it might be the downside, indeed. Yeah, I'm not pretty sure whether we have our participant from Singapore here, so I would also like to listen to his perspective. Yeah, there is Goswan Young. Yeah, hi.
Hi. I have, in fact, worked for Singapore Tourism Board for 2 years, and I was promoting tourism into Singapore. I was head of the Jakarta office. I think that really, if we are, first priority is that we are most concerned about ESG, we are concerned about Mother Earth, then we really need to encourage people to consume less. And therefore, by promoting tourism and saying that there's ESG element in it is somehow contradictory. And so the only thing that might benefit Mother Earth from a tourism perspective is that at the end of the tour, the tourists become more educated about how we are destroying Mother Earth. That's it. But any other form of tourism where you go out there and enjoy, buy a souvenir, consume something, throw away the packaging, and after 3 years, oh, that magnet on my fridge, I've got 300 magnets on my fridge now, that is actually destroying Earth. So I'm unable to come to a conclusion because I am finding the tension in two directions. So sorry, no contribution.
Well, there's a big contribution to theory because we see that those tensions are out there, and sometimes they are persistent, and then they are a paradox maybe as well, but sometimes we can solve them or at least split them. And this is to think in this maybe also paradoxical thinking is sometimes really helpful, although we still are on a theoretical side and might not even have made one impact on the real world. But and this is also, let's say, research, and well, we at least can contribute to this domain. And yeah, thank you very much for this comment. Really appreciate it.
yeah, they're coming, consume less safe environment and make the city beautiful and more sustainable. But that's the problem. If you do this and you make the city beautiful and sustainable, then all the people want to visit and see it. So once again, we are then in the feedback loop. Yeah, why do people want to visit Singapore? But because it's very interesting and nice to see what has happened there. Yeah. Sir, as you know, in recent COVID-19 outbreak, tourism industry is almost ruined. So what's your point of view?
So actually, my colleagues, they did some research also on this, you know, prior COVID, post-COVID practices. And unfortunately, what we were seeing is that although we have this big disruption, most of the business models did not really change. And I think this was kind of sad. And on the other hand, the businesses are quite robust in the end, what is from an economic perspective not bad to survive such an disruption and then still continue to this. But on the other hand, of course, some changes would have been necessary. So also when we think about resilience, and this is another theory, so to be too resilient is also not good. Sometimes businesses need to be more vulnerable to really feel the pressure to change in this way. So yeah.
Agree with Tim. Tourism is crazy now. People want to travel even more after the long lockdown. Yeah, that's also what's interesting. What we see here in Europe, more people want to travel, but the distances are getting shorter. Yeah. Great presentation. Kuswen Young again writes to get rid of the breakfast buffet wastage. And for that, I have a very interesting business case or business model. In one of the hotels, they said everything is all inclusive. So you don't pay for anything, no cent, no penny, unless you have taken much more than you could eat. So if you leave something on your plate, you have to pay for that, not for what you have eaten. I found it's a very fantastic idea to kind of escape the food waste. Excellent. Okay, so Tim, once again, thank you so much. And also Maria for the great presentation, and especially setting some new ways of thinking or impulses. That is very important, because sometimes we get a presentation and done, and sometimes we think, what can we do here much more? Yeah, what is our contribution to already done solutions? And this is exactly the food for our thoughts. And that's why we thank you so much. Yeah, we enjoyed it. Thanks a lot, Tim and Maria.
Thank you, and of course enjoy the rest of the winter school, and yeah, all the best for you all.
Thank you so much, and lots of applauses. Thanks, thumbs up, great presentation. Thanks a lot.